I'm going to talk about another project that I've been involved with, and that's a project with Bellyfield. Briefly, I think you know this already, but anyway, just briefly, I'm a lecturer, at least back at university, and I research and teach screenwriting and related subjects, and I'm very interested in interactive work and how that changes things. So this is part of that debate. I'm calling it Embracing the Chaos, because a lot of people are kind of frightened by the idea that interactive work spells a certain amount of chaos. And because people get to take part. I think often what people see is something which is a bit messy. So I'm going to refer to something called Secret Story Network, which is the project that I developed with Bellyfield, and that we're using as a research project. And it's a collaborative, participative story-making thing. And it's an app, and it allows people to play stories together. But so, you know, we've taken a lot of our inspiration from role-playing games, and all kinds of different sorts of role-playing games. But a lot of what we found was a lot of the role-playing games are kind of, if you like, thinking about guiding people, structuring people. So it's about kind of control. Secret Story Network, I think, has shown us that that control isn't always necessary. That actually storytelling can deal with quite a lot of chaos. So this is the thing that, you know, this is a sort of image of, everybody's doing everything together. So our challenge was how to make this enjoyable for authors and audiences, avoiding the panic and the danger and the stress. So, you know, we took a lot of inspiration from things like Dungeons and Dragons and so on. So, our objective really was to find something which was much less involved, and something that would work online. Anyway, I'm going to give you a little example. What we did, rather than sort of create a whole big world and all of that kind of thing, is we developed these small premises, if you like, and allowed, this is something we would present this premise to people, and then they would join the game and you know, take part in it for themselves. So I need to stop sharing here and then come back again, so don't worry. Here we go. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, so this is one such game.
Right now, Green Novelist needs you. The A-list heroes are out of town on another mission. The city's main renewable energy source has been stolen by capitalist Ken, the fossil fuel magnate. Capitalist Ken has deployed the sludge monster to create chaos while he enacts his dastardly plan. Only you can save the city and pull the world back from the brink of destruction. You're in the B team, but can you bring your A game? Secret Story Network presents Be Good, a case of stolen renewables. Join up now.
Okay. So that's what we would call a premise. We would send that out to people along with maybe something like a poster here, and then some few basic instructions, but very, very minimal. Nothing like, you know, the sort of volumes that other games have. And with that, they would begin to take part. The whole process is guided by what we call a story conductor, and we deliberately call them a story conductor rather than a story master, because this role is slightly different. It does similar things in that the person takes the ideas that are presented by all the different players. But instead of being responsible for the sort of story, the overall story direction, they're much more fluid than that. They're a facilitator, so they take a bit of this and a bit of that. And the idea is that this facilitator needs to be an improviser, really. They would make sure that everybody feels comfortable, that they're playing, they're involved in the play, and that their ideas are taken forward for everybody, not just one person. So it kind of gives us a joint idea of how to take part, if you like. So there's no plot, there's no structure, and there's no prescribed elements. But there are lots of things for people to do. So there, sometimes people have photographs and we draw on them. Sometimes they just text stuff. There's a lot of text type-based stuff going on, but there's also sound. Sometimes there's little games to play and quizzes and things for people to win that kind of shifts the player's attention. And sometimes there are characters which are defined. And so some of the stories are just a bit more structured than others. But sometimes players have to find their own stories and they're given instructions on how to do that. So there's, if you like, there's an element of showing people and training people involved in it. And instead of there being multiple rules and things to sort of make people follow a certain path, there are only 3, and these are them. And they're very, very simple, and they're sort of asking people to think about each other. And I think because we listen and discuss with our players, we haven't had problems, really. There have been 1 or 2 issues, but they're more to do with misunderstandings rather than, any kind of intervention that has to be stopped, if you like. Where people have texted something or, predictive text. In fact, that was me. And terrible at noticing what's going out. So there are things like that that maybe need thinking about. And our stories are short. They're anything from 30 to 60 minutes, although we're kind of experimenting with all kinds of different lengths. And they're all different sorts of genre. Some are more free and some are more sort of make things. So like Dance Around the Fire, everybody has to make something and contribute to that kind of scenario. Whereas Lady Lucinda is a little more organized, if you like, in terms of a thing, a sort of structure that people can contribute to.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt, Anna, but we're going to go over time if we're not careful. So
I'm just there now. So this is what I'm proposing, is that if we enjoy the chaos, we'll learn to get on with it, that people will find a way of working and negotiate with each other. And they will take control, they'll take care of each other, and they will create something that they find mutually satisfying. And so I don't know if you've heard of him, but Hans Moderman suggested this in terms of traffic control. And he's saying, if you allow people to find their own way for themselves, they will work together usefully and productively, and power will be shared. Okay.
So embrace the chaos, less rules, more fun.
That's right.
Brilliant. Well, we will circle back on that, but we're going to go forward and speak with Pete about his moments, his ideas.
So yeah, I loving the embrace the chaos, because that's sort of how my brain works, and probably how this presentation is going to work as well. So hey everyone, is that coming through okay?
Yeah,
cool. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of chat about some of the things I'm thinking really at the moment. And I actually think we're on this really interesting cusp of a new wave of kind of story engines that are much more driven towards this kind of some of the discussions that people have been talking about today. So I'm Pete. I'm kind of an inventor, creator. I do a lot of tinkering and messing with things. I've been using kind of games engines, real-time games engines for storytelling for quite a number of years now, all the way from projects in kind of immersive rooms and interactive rooms using sensors and whatever, all the way through to kind of AR, VR headset kind of stuff as well. So I've been thinking a lot the last few years about these kind of moments and everything. And I just wanted to show this thing, because this for me was something that really kind of stood out for me as sort of that moment, creating that kind of intimate moment in kind of storytelling. It was a project last year by someone called Jimu, called Augmenting Shadows, and basically it was in a large scale immersive environment, and all the users were the individuals in the piece were kind of handed this torch, and this torch kind of created this really interesting interplay between these shadow characters in the piece and the player kind of thing. And I think that's really interesting, because I think one of the challenges has always been, you know, how you do this on a much more kind of mass scale kind of thing. So I've been doing a lot of sort of work that is sort of toying with these same kind of technologies and stuff. So building like immersive environments that effectively, because they operate in a games engine, you can start to kind of interact through tracking systems and things like that. And that challenge of how you do that on a kind of larger scale has always been something that I kind of come back to really. Sort of previously was doing this work with headsets and things like that, but for me, headsets sort of take away something quite important about that kind of shared screen experience. So I'm really keen on sort of breaking kind of some of that. And last year I had the amazing opportunity to spend about 7 months working in a virtual production studio. So, you know, like Industrial Light and Magic, film against these LED kind of screens to create kind of content replacing kind of green screen and things. And one of the things that kind of really occurred to me there is sort of, why are we not kind of taking kind of television and things to that kind of next level kind of thing? So we're kind of creating these amazing, interesting worlds at the point of at the point at which they get broadcast, but why is that not kind of getting translated through kind of thing? Because I think there's some amazing opportunities for new kinds of real-time kind of mass scale experiences, because content is being kind of created in these ways really. And so that kind of gives a kind of superpower I think to kind of creators, because these worlds are amazingly efficient kind of sort of I'm not sure how to describe this really, but these worlds are kind of amazingly efficient at these mixed reality spaces, at being able to tell stories in these massive kind of complex ways that kind of pull together these kind of data points. Here's another example of virtual production kind of methods being used in a kind of immersive theatre experience. So you see the background and the foreground and things interacting with each other. And I just think I've sort of spent yeah, my kind of thing is about the kind of tools and how these tools then determine the kinds of relationships we kind of have in an environment. And kind of going back to what I was saying about the headset thing, that it puts this kind of mediation in front of you, amazing way to experience kind of mixed reality. but it kind of takes something away. So a while back, I kind of took all this kind of tooling together and made this little device, which was effectively a torch. It was like a reverse kind of HoloLens, and you could you could kind of be given this torch as a way to discover kind of the environment, this kind of spatial kind of world around you, really. So, and I've sort of kind of, I'd try and call this kind of like it's critical kind of reimagineering or whatever. If there's something out there in the world you don't like, come on, let's come and re kind of invent it and do something with it that way, kind of thing. Where am I? So yeah, and we did a few different things. So it was a kind of horror-based kind of experiment with someone who'd recreated the room from the Shining kind of thing, and obviously where you are and things that goes to trigger those kind of intimate moments with the content, with the audience, which is all kind of reconstructed in real time, really. So I don't know where I was going with this. So yeah, kind of obviously sort of this will converge at some point soon, but this kind of AI kind of obviously has taken like over quite a lot of the kind of thinking here in terms of the way that can become an input, but also an output for these kind of modes of kind of storytelling and things. My kind of thing here has always been about, you know, how you can put the texture and the humanness kind of back into that, because I mean, real-time CGI, you know, etc., can be kind of very kind of synthetic kind of things. So I've been doing a lot of work lately around that kind of thing, and looking at kind of microcontrol, looking at how we might kind of, it's really interesting. If you ask ChatGPT for a joke, guarantee it'll give you the same joke. It's really interesting. I'm seeing this across lots of different APIs and platforms that are built off of ChatGPT. So I think this next stage of all this stuff is really about how we can kind of control and contain that kind of thing. So there's a lot of shift towards kind of localizing databases using things like retrieval augmented generation, where we can actually have absolute kind of control, and we're not feeding back into these large kind of language models and things like that. And this is really interesting, because I think the ability for a thing to kind of know you, know who you are, know your past relationship with a story, or a story that you might be experiencing in a very fragmented way over many years of your life, I think is really kind of quite fascinating. And yeah, we're in a real-time world now, so these are kind of puppetry kind of examples, all done in real time using kind of controllers and things like that. And I very much see these kind of two worlds converging. So sort of AI kind of automation and real time to really create kind of these fast ways of sort of storytelling with audiences.
Brilliant. So what would be your thing, Pete, do you think, if we were going to talk about a eureka moment?
So I think where I was kind of going to get onto is, you know, if we can conjure worlds and conjure moments, then we're kind of creating superpowers really for kind of our audiences, and that you know, hand over some superpowers to your audience and make them feel like children again, because we kind of get that beaten out of us, I think.
Nice, thank you, excellent. Okay, we'll stay on the call, and we'll have a bit more of a sort of chat about that. But first up, let's welcome Bettina. Hello, and yeah, what are you going to talk about, Bettina?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. And so today I am going to talk about Some ideas that are underpinning a couple of projects that I've got going on at the moment. So my name is Dr. Bettina Bordi, and I'm a lecturer at Leeds Beckett University, like Anna, but I work in the kind of School of Social Sciences and Humanities. And so this next 10 minutes will be maybe a bit more theory in some ways compared to our previous two panelists' talks. So the projects that I've got running at the moment are all interested in exploring the idea of coziness in video games, and specifically coziness in design, coziness in narrative, and just a kind of cozy game feel and what that means, and the kind of tension that lies in this particular aesthetic. And in my approach, or in our approach, I'm particularly informed by this sort of manifesto of coziness of sorts, which was written by a group of North American game designers after a game jam in 2018, and it's freely available online. It's a kind of medium-length document, and it speaks to both what coziness can be, or what it means in games, but also how we can design towards a cozy experience, as well as what it means to design and work in a cozy way in a work environment. And these scholars in their, the developers in the manifesto outline 3 pillars of coziness, namely safety, abundance, and softness. And so if these 3 are present in at least some degree, maybe possibly even high degree, then they argue we can talk about a cozy game. Safety referring to cozy games, quality to not contain any danger or risk. There's no loss or threat of loss. Everything is about familiarity, reliability, predictability. Another aesthetic kind of pillar of coziness is abundance. As we know, a lot of games kind of rely on zero-sum economics, the idea that there is some kind of a lack of resources or a permanent threat to lose resources, and they argue that coziness is the opposite of that. All our needs, like life or air or water or whatever it is that the variable we have in a game might be, are met, or just constantly are being kind of replenished, so we don't have to worry about that. And finally, softness, which is to do with signaling these two to the player so that they know that they're in a low stress environment. And of course, games like Animal Crossing, Spiritfarer, Unpacking from the past few years come to mind when thinking about these design aesthetics. But another interesting thing that the Cozy Game Manifesto speaks about, which was a kind of eureka moment #1 for me, is that we can have coziness present in games that aren't overwhelmingly or predominantly cozy. So in Souls-likes, which are not particularly known for offering soothing aesthetics. In fact, the exact opposite. Mechanics like the campfire mechanic, which both audiovisually but also in terms of their role in the kind of story and the game mechanic provide this sense of safety and lack of existential threat, really. Or fishing or other mini games in open world games like Red Dead Redemption or other that kind of slow down and break up the pace of an otherwise very much not cozy game to introduce these moments of softness or peace almost. Not only that, another surprising kind of tension or discord in when it comes to coziness stems from the sort of, I'd say, like tension, as it were, between the apparent aesthetics of a game such as Animal Crossing and the actual feelings or affect that they afford to their players. So this quote is from a review of Animal Crossing from Jamie Temperton, who wrote it for The Wire, I think, in 2020. And he describes his experience of trying to build this bridge in a very not cozy way. So he says, "I have spent my lockdown mining islands of tarantulas to pay for the construction of a red Zen bridge. It is lonely, terrifying work. When I'm not being bitten by wily spiders in the dead of the night, I spend my days toiling in the fields, shaking trees, hitting rocks, and fishing the seas clean. When I can afford the airfare, I travel to yet more islands and harvest them clean of every resource, filling my pockets until I can fill them no more. There is nothing but toil." So from this, we can see that there's quite a lot of interesting, juicy mix of feelings and emotions going on in cozy games, and that is what I've been interested in my project. So I'm applying for some grants to undertake further research. I'm also publishing some sort of papers on the theory side of it, to unearth this duality to them, that they have somehow simultaneously soothe but also represent stressful things. And the kind of analytical lens that I'm trying to apply to make sense of this is that of agency, because that is what I predominantly work with. I've written lots of kind of articles and books and lots of research in understanding the relationship between technology, people that make them, so designers, but also producers, various kind of circumstances of production and labor, and also the gameplay moment and how that agency can manifest as an affordance of design. And for time reasons, I'm not going to go too deep into how cozy games can be thought of as restricting our agency, but there's a lot of literature, and I'm sure many in the audience are aware of the relationship between kind of video game systems and the degree to which they recreate capitalist logic of, you know, permanent growth and resource accumulation and extractivist logic and all that. But I do want to focus on, to kind of align with the uplifting theme of the panel, is how cozy mechanics or coziness can enhance our sense of agency through the kind of notions of cuteness and plant and our relationship with the environment and the vegetal world especially. So as we know, just a couple of kind of examples here, a lot of cozy games, or games that are recognized or described as cozy by the gaming community or gamers or developers or anyone who contributes to that discourse really, are very often thought as cute games. So there's some kind of cute character, very often animals, cute audiovisual aesthetics to them, such as in Spiritfarer or Behind the Frame, just to name a few. And we can kind of think of coziness in games as a way to grant players an amplified sense of agency, because they are the subject taking in the cozy object, evoking a desire to nurture, care, and tend to, which is quite similar to the affective qualities of cuteness. Even more interestingly, many cozy games operate with kind of mechanics of environment management and plant management. So we have gardening mechanics, or growing and nurturing natural environments, harvesting produce, or taking care of individual plants, like in the case of strange horticulture. And there's quite a lot of research, and sorry to go kind of philosophy here, but there's quite a lot of research and philosophy and sort of humanities that tries to unearth our relationship with the natural environment by examining mechanics of agency. And recent kind of metaphysical discussions describe this shift in how we think about the environment and our space within it, calling for a reconsideration of both the implications of plant life as a mode of being, which poses a radical alternative to humanity, and the meanings and effects of the intersections of plant and human life in culture. Very interestingly, we can understand, for example, the kind of fear of horror games, many horror narratives, where the horror effect comes from the threat and tension that exploits our existing notions of trees that have a will of their own, or a natural environment that has a will of its own. And so we as a player are kind of forced to surrender our agency to these menacingly designed agentic trees. In cozy games, we can kind of see the ordinary reverse of that, the opposite, where we take care of these environments, the flowers, bushes, orchards, etc., as a way to exert our sense of control and enhance a sense of agency and empowerment that we perhaps feel we lack when it comes to our actual physical kind of surrounds in, you know, contemporary kind of Anthropocene. And a final Eureka moment, I suppose, is what happens when it is a realization that I had when I started thinking about the margins of coziness. So games that kind of merge very cozy but also very not cozy aesthetics. Two examples here being Dredge, which is a kind of cozy horror fishing sim, if you like, or Strange Horticulture, which again is a kind of Victoriana Gothic themed plant shop simulator of sorts. So it's really interesting to see how this duality is not being kind of hidden, like, for example, in the case of Animal Crossing, but it's actually almost harvested for its uniqueness or strangeness to get a very strange, unexpectedly cozy and yet threatening kind of effect. And to finish, literally last slide.
Last slide. Okay.
Sorry, bear with. To finish, I just wanted to kind of end on a cozy propaganda of sorts, which is an excerpt from the Cozy Game manifesto. The designers are calling for calling for kind of cozy design. They say, in a time of increasing divisiveness, othering and rampant fear and sensationalism, we propose that coziness, in that it provides safety, softness, and the satisfaction of needs, is in fact a powerful and necessary subversion of current culture. Coziness is healing, validating, collaborative, and kind. Coziness is relief and refuge and gentle opportunity. In a harsh, demanding ecosystem of cynically generated needs and unending urgency, coziness creates comfort and freedom and a path to a better world. So there goes my Eureka moment. Let's get cozy. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. It was quite interesting what you were saying. What struck me was the idea that agency kind of links is a way of calming stress in these games. That was really fascinating for me. But yeah, does anybody else have any thoughts? I mean, in terms of this kind of panel, it's up to the panel to quiz one another in a way. So has anybody got any questions for the others?
Not so much a question, but I'm kind of interested in this coziness thing, because you know, some of the stuff that I've been talking about is how do you make things human, and how do you bring this sort of the way in which we interact with each other in the outside world into the online environment. So I'd never thought about coziness in that way, or that sort of cuteness is a way of promoting safety. So I'm really interested in how that might work, particularly as some of the stuff I'm doing with Bellyfield is going to be linked to issues of mental health and so on. So that kind of that sort of interests me a lot, actually. And likewise, that sort of mixed media thing that you're talking about, Pete. You know, how do ordinary people get involved in that thing? And I'm very worried about the control. I mean, I like the idea of AI, for example, lending a hand, and you know, the stuff we heard this morning is really interesting, what you can do with it and how you can play with it. But do you know, I'm wondering if you think things are going down the control road rather than the chaos road.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Anna. I know that wasn't really a question, but I will take this opportunity to talk some more about this. Yes, one of the fascinating, like, coziness as overall not belongs, but could be made sense of in a broader kind of discourses in philosophy and social sciences that emphasize like radical care and just nurturing and taking care, rather than these kind of predominantly neoliberal or capitalist logics of accumulating goods and managing high pressure environments, and all these narratives that kind of focus on, or just games themselves very often by virtue of being games focusing on progress and leveling up and all of that. So I don't know how to finish the sentence, but where I was going yeah, that's kind of the big Eureka moment for me, I think, is a lot of my past research focused very much on those sort of games. And then it was almost like an eye-opening of, oh my God, we actually can still maintain a lot of what is playful, fun, challenging, interesting, complex about video games, but also look at it through a radically different lens, which is, I mean, I call it coziness, but there's lot like empathy games or art games or lots of different ones. Kind of labels have been circulating since the casual boom, really, of the kind of early 2000s, mid 2010s. So this is in no way novel. I think it's just the terminology of cozy has recently re-emerged in discussions. I've seen it thrown around in various kind of gaming subcultural forums, but also broadly speaking in cozy media. So that's kind of my main project. I'm looking at the cozification of media in like television and other kind of realms to make sense of this shift towards why we are thirsty for this kind of content, if I may say so. What is it about our current zeitgeist that calls for additional need to soothe and, you know, feel soft and taken care of, as opposed to constantly being threatened, the same way disaster movies are not in fashion anymore. But I'm just rambling now, so thank you.
Thank you. Pete, do you want to pick up on what you were saying?
Yeah, I guess yeah, in response to the thing about control, I think what's really interesting about probably the kind of the kind of AI kind of real-time bit piece, and one of the things I'm sort of interested in exploring is this sort of idea that your assumed kind of user kind of isn't, we aren't all the same, and we all have different motivations. And now it's quite interesting, I think, because if we're talking about systems that can effectively, I mean, we see this in dynamic kind of content optimization, dynamic kind of creative, you know, you can rerun something hundreds of thousands of times for different users, and that can be the kind of same thing. And I think that's quite interesting because it changes our ideas, or that it kind of really shifts this kind of one-to-many kind of idea, really. And we're already seeing stuff like, you know, narratives being done in, I was looking at a new translation device yesterday, and it was possible for a teacher to be talking to hundreds of different people at the same time. And when we start to potentially base this on motivation, or we start to base this on other things, I think that gets really interesting. So I think, yeah, but it's a tough one, I think, and there are sort of dangerous sort of ethical things to look into.
So in terms of virtual production, you were talking about how there's so much available at the point of creation where things are captured, and maybe there's some kind of like missing link between where that could go, both one-to-many or kind of individuals. Like what's missing, do you think?
I just think it's sort of really interesting, you know, we're sort of starting to produce stuff in this way. How it goes out, do you know, it doesn't all have to be received in the kind of same way. So I can see, and you can easily imagine kind of new formats, for example, for television that might be enabled and kind of made possible by these new kind of story engines, because basically the thing gets compiled at the user end rather than at the broadcast end. And that shift for me is really interesting and really exciting on a mass kind of scale kind of mechanism. I know kind of Netflix have almost but cancelled their kind of look into that sort of space between games, and we'll just leave it at games, we'll just leave it at storytelling. But I think there's a lot more to explore there potentially.
Yeah, I mean, I've never thought about it, but as you say, it seems obvious that you would want to put the audience into the story engine. It's just like a complete no-brainer, although it's not quite there yet. And obviously some people do that, and some games do that, but there is something else going on there, I think. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Do you know, the broadcasters know, do you know, then they're not engaging as well as they could do with the generations that are coming through, and that are kind of demanding this kind of agency and stuff. And I think there's some really interesting missing links to explore.
Yeah, I've got a question for you, Anna, actually, if I can. You're on mute, by the way.
Sorry.
Has chaos always been part of storytelling?
Well, yes. I mean, there are loads of early experiments and you know, people trying to deal with that or testing it out. So, you know, in novels and what have you, you've got those novels where you can, I think it's the Nabokov one, where you just throw it all up in the air and then there's a story. So that kind of chaos. But I think this is a different type of chaos, in that it's involved in interpersonal relationships. So you're not just dealing with something that you can order or what have you. I think it's about learning to deal with each other. And I think that's kind of interesting. And maybe that's why I think it's a good time to relook at all of that again, you know, and see what is participation and how does it work. You know, there was a lot of that in the 90s and early 2000s, and then it all went away because people didn't really want to do it, or find it too difficult. But now the real possibilities are there, and I think you know, we shouldn't worry too much about, I mean, we have to be careful of AI, but it can be, it seems to me it might be a real powerful tool in that sort of relationship building, and how we, you know, how we sort of think about what it's doing, and how people are aware of its role and who's controlling it and all that kind of stuff. But there's these, you know, there's always the possibility to do this stuff for you know, positive reasons, and then there's always, you know, an abuse of that. So those are issues that never go away. The technology though is now maybe converging more in a way that we once hoped it would.
Excellent. Any more questions or thoughts from within the group? Okay. Somebody did write in and asked if, Anna, you could repeat your final reference about shared power, please.
How do you mean repeat it?
They didn't get it, so they if you haven't got it to hand, don't worry, because it will be on the replay. But
yeah, no, I've got it somewhere. Hold on. the what the are they talking about the hands?
that's all it says. Could you ask Anna to repeat the final reference about shared power, please?
Okay. Well, the very last one was there's a town planning person called Moderman, Hans Moderman. Sorry, my power is going. He had this idea of removing all the traffic lights and road curbs and all of that kind of thing, and it proves that you know, you don't need all these things. We don't need these controls in order to be able to coexist. But what happens is that people have to find their own way. If you remove all of those things, they have to negotiate with each other and use their own brains, if you like. And what that means then is it's a transfer of power. So instead of somebody telling you, "Oi, stop there, you know, there's danger there," you think, "Oh, I best get out of the way of that motorcyclist, because otherwise there's going to be an accident." So it removes, he wanted the power to be removed from the state to the individual, but I think we're, in story terms, we're talking about removing the power from the author to the audience. So I kind of like that. And I love those pictures of chaotic, you know, road crossings. And I was in Naples recently, and it's true, if you go with the flow, everything's all right.